could hardly read it. There was moss on it, and it had Thomas, it had Mary, it had George, James, Willie, and Maggie. But the dates were all wrong. There's no way this could have been my great-grandfather because he died in 1857 or something like that. Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, this isn't making any sense. So then I started phoning around, and I phoned the Pinecrest Cemetery, and I said, I'm doing my family research, and I'm looking for lands. I said, I know my grandparents are there, my parents are there, my mother's parents were there as well. And I said, because Pinecrest owned a little piece of that property out there. There was Pinecrest Cemetery and Maryville Cemetery, sort of side by each and up against one another. So I said, do you have any records of that? And she said, all I have is George Lang, and it says Lot 100, and there's not much of a map of this. It's just a tiny little community church cemetery.
Right.
So she told me who it was. And I said, is there any other information on the record? And she says, it says daughter L.C. Benson. I said, okay, that's his daughter for certain. That's Lily. I said, so now we know that that's him. And I said, she said, and she said that's all I have, though, that he's buried in Maryville. So I couldn't find a tombstone. So anyway, I said, well, if he's here, and I went over, and there's no other Lang. We looked at every tombstone in that cemetery. No George Lang. So I did a little more research, and I started, how did I end up talking? I said, I have to contact the church and find out, how that Thomas Lang, what Lang that is. So I got in touch with the lady who takes care of the records for its St. John the Divine, and it's Maryville United. Mm-hmm. So I got a hold of the lady, and she lives 2 blocks from my house. So I phoned her, I was talking to her on the phone, and I said, I'm trying to find this tombstone for my great-great-grandfather. I know he's there. My great-grandfather, George Lang, and she said, it's Lot 100. And she said, well, it should be near the church. And I said, yeah, there's only one there, and it's Thomas. And I said, there's a George, but the date's wrong. And she said, well, let me see what I have. So she said, let me call you back. So she has the records like in a shoebox at her spare bedroom at home, I guess. That's how small it is. So she called me back, and she said, no, the only Lang I have is a Thomas. And I said, well, that's the one that I found. And she says, yeah, she says, next of kin, granddaughter L.C. Benson, that's all I have. And I said, what did you say? And she said, granddaughter L.C. Benson. I said, well, that's it. I said, so Thomas Lang is George Lang's father. And sure enough, a little more research found it. That's absolutely right. So George Lang's father, so that would be your great-grandfather, is Thomas Lang. So I found this just by linking these 2 little pieces of information that somebody had scrawled on an index card. So then I did a little more. So I went back to other records that I looked at. I found an 1851 census for Nepean Township. Right. And it listed, and I saw this Thomas Lang and family, but I didn't pay any attention to it because, I was looking for George Lang and Margaret Laird. Mm-hmm. So sure enough, I go back and flip it open, and there it was, and it was like the sky opened up for me. Thomas Lang with George Lang and James Lang and James's wife and their children were all living in the same house. Thomas Lang, yeah. So they were all right there.
In a little house, too.
I don't know. No. Oh, you know where they were living? They were farming in a lot that right now borders on Hunt Club Road and Woodruff Avenue. So Thomas Lang, it was under James's Lang's name, which was his oldest son. He had 200 acres that ran from Woodruff Avenue to Greenbank Road.
Wow.
Pretty much right across from the high school or the Nepean Sportsplex is right now. Okay. Now, I believe that was all expropriated by the government back in the day.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I'm assuming then that Thomas Lang came over. And I found records where he came over. He came over from Ireland. He was the first
that's
Lang.
Right.
Yeah, in 1829.
Remember that story, that the ancestors came from Ireland.
Yeah, he came over in 1829 and took up farming right there, I guess, in the Maryville area. And as James was the eldest son, I guess he got the farm, land or what have you, took over the farm. And the next was George Lang, who married Mary Jane Purdy, and they ended up moving downtown, and they lived down in downtown, and that's probably where it all started. That's where your father was born, and everything. So it was all down in the Dalhousie ward and the St. George's ward, all sort of LeBreton Flats and all the way back to Carling Avenue.
And I think really that they all did well,
Yep.
by what I remember the talk. I think they all prospered at what they did. They made beyond their living, you know. They, so I didn't know just what at. So there, it's farming, and I guess the land that they sold maybe had it subdivided or whatever. Right?
When they came. Now I can't find James. He married.
This is Jim. Is that what you mean?
No, this is a generation back. So this
beyond
is
that.
George's brother,
Okay.
James.
Okay.
A generation back. Now he married Jane. I'm not sure whether it's Horne, Horne, or Howe, or something like that.
Is this information all?
Yeah, it's all in here. Yeah, it's all in here.
Great.
So they had about a dozen children, and some of them had passed away, and that's whose name was on that white tombstone that I found at Maryville Cemetery.
Oh, okay.
Was Maggie and Willie and George. Oh, so George, not this George, James's son George, and I'm going to say Willie. They both died on exactly the same day.
Oh.
So I don't know whether it was an accident or whether there was a sickness there.
A flu swept the country
Influenza.
then. I can remember Mom, even when Willie and Sis and that were little, a flu swept through, and